Welcome, everyone. We are here with Dr. Ervin Laszlo, who we are so honored to have the time to spend with today. For those of you who are not familiar with his work, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about who he is and what he's done and what he stands for. He is the founder and director of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research in Italy. He's also the founder and president of the Club of Budapest, a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. He's a member of the International Academy of Philosophy of Science. He's also a senator of the International Medici Academy, the editor of World Futures, and he has received countless awards and honors. And there's so many of them that I wouldn't be able to list them all, but a couple of them include Ethics Prize of Milan, the International Nobel Peace Prize, the Luxembourg Peace Prize, and he's also been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice and holds honorary PhDs from the US, Canada, Finland, and Hungary. He's done global projects at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, and he's the author, co-author, or editor of 106 books translated into 25 languages. So we are so honored to have you here. Thank you for making it.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, beautiful. I can kick off the first question. We were curious because we stem from both science and spirituality in our work. And as far back as the 1990s, you spoke about the Akashic field, right? Which was really early days. What was your aha moment then for what you discovered about the Akashic field, and what has the latest developments been in your work and your research to bring it up to modern day?
Well, there were two insights that dawned. I don't know exactly why they dawned and when they dawned, but they dawned. They came about in the course of my English people, my writing, and so on. Two insights. One is that all things are connected, and the other thing is that nothing disappears completely. So one is connection, the other one is, as you might say, memory in the universe. We know that energy cannot be created, cannot be destroyed, it can be only transformed. I think what we have to add to it also that information, whatever structure and shapes and orient energy, the energy flow, also that cannot be destroyed, also cannot be created. We have an amount of information available, the life energy in the universe, the evolutionary energy. This is not a passive universe, it's a universe that's constantly evolves, moves along paths that are coherent and understandable, comprehensible. That's what Einstein said is the most remarkable thing about this universe is that it's coherent enough to be comprehensible, at least in large part. So what made me think like this? The whole caboodle of things, all the things that I came across, everything points to the fact that when you dig further down, you'll find that nothing is here today and gone tomorrow. Nothing is completely gone. Everything leaves a trace. And the other thing is that you can't do one thing, as Gregory Bateson later on said, because all the other things are also coming along with it. You can't do one thing because that one thing that you're doing is intimately and intrinsically, you can now say, connected with practically all other things. This is a highly connected universe. It's a highly participatory universe. It's a highly memory-filled universe. It's a very different kind of world than we thought at the time when Newton gave his mechanistic laws. Newton himself didn't believe that mechanistic laws and passive space is all there is. In fact, he wrote treatises which are now in the British Museum that describe his deep sense of awe and understanding of what he called matter, not the surface matter, but the materiality of the universe. Anyway, just to say this much. So I came across this notion, and I'm reinforced by everything I do since then. This is truly a universe of connection and memory. And what describes this best in the tradition, in the spiritual tradition, the Akashic records. The Akashic records which show that whatever happens now has a background, has happened before, has happening to all things around us, and it will continue to happen. It won't disappear. So when I talked about this, I found a very large resonance in people who said, yes, we heard about that. That seems to make sense. And so I've been developing this notion, among other things, like new paradigm and now the upshift. These are some key concepts that I'm developing, by developing also the notion of the Akashic field. As a science, it's not the Akashic records per se, but it's a field that has memory and connection.
And we all have access to that memory and connection.
We are it. We are part of it. We are part of it. And nothing is outside of anything else. So we ourselves are in the field. We are part of the field. The field is us.
Beautiful. That's the whole notion and idea that we are the universe.
Would you say that everything is connected? We're all connected to everything intrinsically.
Yes. But it's a funny connection, it's not the usual thing when you think that it's connected by pushing a button, by some wire or by some lever that you pull. I mean, it's not an external connection. What we see in quantum physics now, what happens to one part of a particle, which is divided, when it has the same quantum state and is divided, then it's radiated to some finite distance. What happens is not something that you act on it. It just happens to that too, other half of the particle too. Mm-hmm. That's what we mean by intrinsic connection. It's not connecting A to B. It's A and B being one. And that's what applies to the universe.
You've also written that there's a force in the universe, a tropism or an attractor that biases non-random interactions towards forming complex entities that are coherent and evolve towards higher levels of coherence and complexity. So that's kind of taken it a step further from what you were just talking about, which is the ever evolving participatory universe.
Well, that's, you see, that's a bit my problem also, but you quoted is what I wrote, but it's too dense to be understood all at once. It's too much for a single sentence, as it's written.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. If you take it apart, then one can write a book on it. I wrote several books on it. This is, I think, the crux of the matter is what you just quoted.
Yeah.
I often think about time and space, this connectivity of all these things, all of these beings, who we are, this energy, these frequencies, modulations of vibrations. And I often think that we don't occupy the time and space that we think we do, but we are the creation of it. We are the creation of time and space. We are time and space itself. Therefore, all things are connected and shall always be that way.
I can subscribe to that, yes.
I believe you can, good sir.
It's not a question of creator and creation. There's no outside creator, as far as we know.
No, there isn't.
An ultimate level of super high integration. Maybe you'll find a source, which is the highest possible source. For now, what we can say on the basis of science and its observations and experiments is that all things constitute a single evolving coherent entity. And it evolves more and more in the direction of coherence, which seems a strange thing to say, because if you look around in the world, it's extremely incoherent around us these days. Yeah. But underneath it, if you look a little bit deeper, you find that actually there is an emerging coherence. Right now, we no longer talk about little units of bits and pieces of time and space here and now. It's not just we in New York or in California or in Paris or wherever. It's all of us all over the globe. We are now involved on the global level and meshed and brought together on a global level. So not only particles are entangled, we ourselves are entangled. Yeah. And the fact is that we are now beginning to operate. Whenever we try to solve a problem, we are pushed. We are made to rise, perhaps to say better, onto a planetary level. When in the late 1990s, I wrote a piece with the Dalai Lama called the Manifesto on the Spirit of Planetary Consciousness. We talked about the spirit and planetary consciousness. People thought, what is a planetary consciousness? How can you go anything planetary, you know? Now I think people don't question that. Things are the climate change issue, the heating up of the atmosphere is a planetary phenomenon. War and violence now is a planetary phenomenon. It's the refugee crisis, the health crisis. All of these are moving now onto a planetary level with all the problems and challenges, but all the opportunities that level gives us. Because we are now not just operating in a local environment, we are global, as they say, local and global at the same time. And that's a tremendous advance, actually. Of course, with all the problems. But if we succeed, if we do not succeed in killing ourselves off, let me say, you know, in the process, then I think we'll move to a level where we are organizing ourselves as a living species, living in some form of coexistence on this small and very rich planet. That, I think, is what is happening. And to urge to smooth that, to smooth the way, to help it happen. That is, I think, the mission we accept if we are conscious and evolutionary leading type of persons.
You know, you mentioned something about, you know, the waves and the particles, right? That at a micro level, right? From quantum physics, we kind of knew that at this micro level, but now that it's showing up in the macro level as well, right? Like with human beings, there's been an effect to that. And I wonder, because David Bohm's work is obviously emerging more and more again, or they're looking at it. And I love, you know, he calls the explicate order, right, which is not the ultimate reality, but more like projections and manifestations, and that the implicate order is more like cosmic consciousness. So do you want to talk about that a little bit for people who, A, are not familiar with Bohm's work, and B, how that applies really to us in the here and now of us really understanding what reality is?
Well, the idea that there are several levels of what we experience, several reality levels, is not new. That's thousands of years old. I mean, in Plato, it comes through very, very clearly, for example. You know, the analogy of the cave, you know, where people are chained in a cave and they look forward in a wall and they see figures, and actually it turns out that the figures are reflections, are shadows of a light source which is behind them. But they're chained so they can't see the light source, but they can see the shadows. But they mistake them for reality. Well, that's an analogy, because spirituality has known all along the deeper sense that we have, that it's not all what we perceive is our senses. What we perceive is our five senses, is a small little section, a segment of the information that is reaching us. And God knows there is more information beyond that, which doesn't reach us because it's even beyond the everyday world in every way. So the fact is, we now know the electromagnetic spectrum has a tremendous range of light and of sound and of touch and smell and everything else. But we only perceive a small part of that. So what we don't perceive is not only because we don't have the sensory equipment, but also because it's not perceivable. There is a reality which is not given to perception by our sensory organs. Perhaps in deep meditative states, altered states of consciousness, we perceive a little bit more of that. But with deep intuition, perhaps we can penetrate more and more. But the fact is that there is more than one level of reality. The surface level and the deeper level. Now, in David Bohm, the deeper level, the implicate order, is what generates the explicate order, the surface level. That's a very good way of thinking about it, because then we don't really have a split reality, only two levels of reality, two levels of emergence. You know, the implicate order, which is the ultimate, as far as we can tell on the basis of physics, is the ultimate field or sphere of existence, where all things are given. All things are given in full, in a timeless way. And what the explicate order is unfolds this unfolded reality. It unfolds it, and it presents us with a world which consists of things here and there, and at time and time again. So time and space, as you have said a moment ago, is something that is being created in the process of evolution. I think we are proper product of evolution, just as all things are, just as space-time is a product of evolution in a scientific perspective. Yeah. So explicate order, don't mistake it as the shadows for reality. The reality is deeper. Why is that important? I'm sure that's what you wanted to know. Why is that important? Because it gives us orientation. It's the deeper reality. If you can access it, it connects us to the source, because the deeper reality is the source. If you can comprehend it, if you can access it through an altered state of consciousness, through science perhaps, but also through nature, just being one with nature, there's so many ways, then I think we can become more true to what there is in the world and don't make these mistakes, the mistakes that we've been making the last couple of 100 years, especially the last several decades, which is really to divorce ourselves from the natural level of the universe, of the Gaia system around us, and go on our own way, thinking that that's the way we can surmount the problems because we are superior to all the natural events. That is a lesson that we are now learning. It's a bitter lesson actually, because we have to live within nature, within the system of life on this planet. Ultimately, that's our reference. So it's a whole caboodle problem. One thing leads to another, as you see, but it's a whole new worldview. It's a new paradigm, as we call it.
I wanted to bring in the brain, and maybe you can expand upon it with your own experience of this. Mm-hmm. So this is about the brain being not just a receiver, but a transcriber, right? So it's almost like this individual, manifestation that we are is part of this universal consciousness. So, we're accessing kind of this non-local information because we are a receiver or transcriber. Do you want to expand on that?
A receiver of information.
Yeah.
Should I really expand upon it?
Yes.
Okay. I will expand. I am a channeler, and I'm able to channel everything, the all, you might say. And everything that you speak about, that you've written about, has been given to us in ways for us to understand. I don't know exactly how it's done, but it is done. It is completed in a way that I can't fully comprehend. But I do see, and what has been told to us is that we are connected, we are everything and nothing all at the same time. We are space-time, we are the universe that is constantly rebirthing itself in a way that we don't fully comprehend, but we're getting there, little by little.
And that's why your work is so important and just so profound.
Well, I'm, in a way, somehow, I'm saying that I'm also channeling it.
Yes.
Because when I'm writing, I have a leading idea, something that occurs to me, about a given topic, a given challenge, a given questions, And I try to unpack it, as they might say. I try to just phrase it in some way that it becomes understandable. Obviously, you leave out a great deal, but at least some elements you try to get. But as I do that, the sentences, the ideas line up, they form. I'm not creating it. I don't decide to do that. I allow it to come. Mm. Because they come, I can't even help it to let it come. Because it's an urge, it's a compulsion, if you like. I can't stop very often. But what comes forth, if it makes sense to me, okay, then I'll try to polish it for expression, so to make it as clean and clear as possible. and then share it. If I have any thoughts about it, I don't, and then I have to go back and rethink it, and I just forget this and try something else. Sometimes that happens, but quite often things seem to build one thing on top of the other, and it's a tremendously fulfilling and satisfactory experience.
I want to make sure that we touch upon your new book, right, which I couldn't put down and finish, The Upshift, The Path to Healing and Evolution on Planet Earth. You talk about 3 clarion calls needed during this time: the call for creativity and diversity, the call for responsibility, and the call for planetary consciousness. Do you want to expand on that for people?
Well, that's something that I have to give credit to the Dalai Lama for. Because that's a quote from the manifesto on the planetary consciousness, which came about in a curious way. I was in India at the time. I was at the time served as chairman of the Auroville board. Auroville is this international city, which is in India, but not part of India. And the spiritual people founded by Sri Aurobindo, the great spiritual master, Indian spiritual master. So I was in India at that time, and the Dalai Lama visited Madras nearby, which is now Chennai. And so my friends there of the Auroville board arranged a 5-minute interview with His Holiness. So I went over to the room where His Holiness was staying, and he asked me what I'm doing, and I said, I'm trying to put together a kind of a statement on a new consciousness. And he said, that sounds interesting, and what is it? And I started reading what I wrote, and he started commenting on it. And the comments became more and more until they overlaid practically what I wrote originally, but maintained that spirit. And he canceled all his appointments for the day. And by late in the evening, his secretary had a whole little booklet full of his writings. And then when we transcribed that, it turned out to be the manifesto on the spirit of planetary consciousness, which we adopted then at a meeting of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in October of 1996. And I'm living off that in many ways, because these are inspired words. So these 3 cause, what he called it, and what we call cause challenges, are really a part of that. And the last one became somehow the keynote for the work also of the Laszlo Institute and of the Club of Budapest, which is the call for planetary consciousness. I mentioned them before. Now people understand planetary consciousness doesn't mean something abstract, and certainly doesn't mean the consciousness of the planet. It means a consciousness that is now operating on a planetary level. And so the call for that today is more important than ever. And I'm reproducing it in this book, which for the time being you can say it's my new book. In a couple of months, it will be not the newest book, because I'm doing a sequel to it. This book is called The Upshift. The sequel is called The Upshift Imperatives. The difference in that is that I wrote for the Upshift Imperatives, I wrote the key concept, the keynote paper, as you like, and then I'm asking 45 people, international thought leaders, including some that you mentioned, like Neil Donald Walsh, for example. I'm asking them to write down in 2 pages or so what they think is the right way forward. How can we move out of this dilemma, out of this mess that we are in, the chaos, the incoherence, and moving toward a more harmonious world? Not just purely as an idea, as a utopia, but with concrete steps. So I see what happens. So far, practically everybody I asked accepted to write. In a couple of months, we'll see perhaps 2 dozen or 3 dozen contributions, which tells us about what I would like to call the imperative path, the path that we have to take because without it, it won't go, which is absolutely necessary. So that's going to the next book. But so far, what I've thought of so far, I've tried to pack together in a rather dense way, as we said, in the book called The Upshift, the path to healing and evolution on planet Earth. That's what we are talking about. Healing so that we can move forward. Evolution, because once we are healed, we are also evolving, not just staying put.
Well, I certainly hope that love and oneness are the key instruments and commonalities that run across all of these thought leaders. Let's hope.
It does. When you really ask people to say, what did you find? I'm sure if you ask you today as well, what did you find in your deepest states of meditation or the states of consciousness? People say, I find the oneness. I find an unconditional love for all things, and I find myself belonging. And that struck me so much that I wrote a book about a year and a half ago called the Reconnecting to the Source. I asked these thought leaders, and they all independently of each other, not knowing of each other, not knowing about the right of each other, about the problem. They all came up with strikingly the same thing: this sense of oneness, sense of empathy, sense of belonging, sense of togetherness, and which is fueled by the motivation for love. So that, to me, is the force. That to me, young people talk about be the force, be with you. I think that's what it means. Be the force of oneness. Be with us. That the way we can live on this earth and be and well be, because we need to now need a higher level of well-being. But for that, we have to assure our being, because our very being is now in question.
Yeah, perhaps that's really as simple as it is, right? The catalyst, right? That was one of my questions, but it sounds like your next book is really going to unpack this question. And that is, the catalyst that's going to really start to bridge science and spirituality again in a way that's respected and supported and embraced on both sides, right? Because even though we're starting to see it coming more and more together, the materialists are still, I think there was that famous quote that for real change to happen, you have to wait for the last generation to die off.
Well, then all generations will die off if you have to wait that long. Spirituality just explores, just penetrates a little further beyond the world of the senses. Spirituality can apply to the sensory world because we try to make sense of what there is, And to make sense of it, we have to draw on our insights. We all have insights if you just let them surface. So if we can do that, then we can unpack what is coming to us in such a way that maybe an outside observer calls it just spirituality. But inside, it feels true. It feels right. Because inside, it's closer to that unobservable domain that David Bohm called the implicate order. It's unobservable, but it's not unreal. It's real. It's probably more real than anything else. So spirituality is just having a stronger light in our hands, a torch light in which you can see a little bit further, a little bit better.
I wanted to ask just a quick question as well. You've been around on this earth plane for a while. Where are we headed as human beings? What is your opinion of us? Where do you think we're going? I always ask all of the people that we interview, are we kinder? Are we more gentle? Are we more loving than we were just 50 years ago or 100 years ago?
Not necessarily. And where we're going, I don't know. But we could be going toward extinction, total chaos. We are on the way. Doesn't mean that we are going there, but we are headed in that direction. That's why the need for change. We could be going someplace else than what we are going now. It's a nice saying, I think from China. If you don't change direction, you'll end up exactly where you're headed for. That's a kind of an old Chinese saying, I'm told. It's not a good thing to end up where we're headed for. We need to change. And this change is already occurring. And it's occurring because, not despite of, but because of chaos. because of crisis. The deadliest sin, I think, is staying put, is self-sufficiency in the sense of, I'm looking for a word, but perhaps we'll get to it in a little while. Being so superficial that you think everything is okay. I don't need to do anything. It will just work the way it will. That it must. And this complacency, no, that's the word I wanted, to be complacent. So I think we are changing, and we have to be thankful for the challenge, so that we don't sit around thinking that, okay, everything is okay the way it is, nothing can be changed. That belief that nothing can be changed, everything is okay, now it's being destroyed. That belief is falling apart. Very few people have to be so starch conservatives that they hold that. This world is not sustainable as it is. Yeah. Therefore, we must change. How do we change? I don't know. But I know that we can change. And I know a better way would be the change via oneness, via love, via the understanding that what we do to others, we do to ourselves. Yeah. And that we are not outside of nature, but part of it.
Yeah.
We try to move into the spirit of the Gaia system. All life on Earth being one system of which humanity is an expression, not a separate entity, not above it. So that's a big change. That's a paradigm change. From outside the system, putatively above it, to back into the system, not only connecting to it, but becoming with it, becoming part of it, where we meant to be, where we really are.
Yeah. This lends me to something I want to make sure I don't forget to ask before we wrap is, a field of vibration, right? So in our channeling sessions, this comes forth a lot, the information that the earth is a vibration. It's simply one vibration of many. And so I'm curious how you see a field of vibration. So in other words, if the earth is simply one vibration, and that's part of a bigger field of vibration, right? This universe or this multiverse, then what are we as individuals? Are we frequencies that resonate with this vibration?
If you say that what is there, I think great scientists said it, this was including Einstein, including Max Planck, in the final count, there is no matter, nothing hard and solid and unchangeable. So if the universe is a field of vibration, of which some are so coherent that they appear solid, they appear material, then it's still just an appearance. Our body appears to be material. Of course, our consciousness doesn't appear to be material because there is nothing it's not the brain, apparently. So if we can rise above the fallacy of thinking that consciousness is just a product, a function of the brain, I think that's a big step. But in fact, we are one vibration among a system of vibrations. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to know about reality, talk about amplitudes and phase and frequency. Let's talk about wave phenomena. It's a different way of looking at the world, different way of assuming what the world is. And I think it's closer to reality. Maybe we'll never know full and ultimate reality. But certainly, I think it's more adequate than thinking of the world as bits and pieces of material particles rushing about in space and time.
Wow. Just a beautiful image. You have a final question?
I just want to thank you for sharing your time, the precious time that you have with us, and answering some of these questions for, our audience and really for the world itself about who we really are in this lifetime and how important it is that we be kind to each other, that we really are these vibrations and frequencies of oneness, of all, of love. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we as human beings are getting there little by little.
Yeah,
indeed. That's what I call the upshift.
Yeah.
I just want to end on that note. I talked about paradigm change. I even wrote about I founded an institute called the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research, researching the new paradigm, what that is and how we can access it. But now I put all my brunt of my energies and efforts into upshift, the whole concept that what is in front of us is as fundamental change. If it's not going up, it will go down. And if it goes down, that's the end of the human story on the planet. But the upshift is something that can happen if you become conscious of the need for it. Mm-hmm. If we come together and shift up together, not so difficult, because it's to become more of what we truly are, just to become more of it, better expressing it, not anything artificial, not creating a new man, a new person, some abstract idea, just become part of nature, part of the universe. This, as I said, is an evolving, self-evolving, coherence-oriented universe. If you become part of that, become more loving, more comprehending, more part of it, and that is good for you, and it's good for the world, good for all of us. I think it can be done.
With that, I just want to read just a short excerpt from your book that kind of talks a little bit about this, because it's just really well said. You know, as we go through this fundamental and major shift in history, right, at this time, we have choices to make, right? And that's what your book and all of your work really echoes so well. Sure. You talk about fundamental change and that we need a disruption in a system for that change to be sustainable. A disruption is needed, which we're seeing in the world right now. And then you also talk about a critical fluctuation and that they always occur in a system, but when they reach a critical point, and I think we're there now, the system either shifts to a more stable branch or decomposes. And that stable branch is really the coherence that you've spoken about. And I think what's great right now is places like HeartMath, right? They have research on heart coherence. They literally have scientific data to back that up. And so I think that coming together with your work, right, will hopefully get people to realize the critical nature of where we are right now and how important it is to make decisions that are more unity consciousness, more focused on oneness and more focused on love. So, you know, bravissimo to the work that you have done in the world and continue to bring into the world.
Thank you, Renee. I keep being somewhat optimistic also because you mentioned this term critical. There's an idea of critical mass. We don't need the upshift simultaneously of 8 billion people. You know, we need groups of people who upshift themselves and who communicate with each other, reinforce each other. Then it becomes then it spreads. This is how all new novelty spreads on the evolutionary level. Ilya Prigozhin, the Nobel laureate physicist, described this very well as a bifurcation, as a nucleation process. A tiny little fluctuation can blow up all of a sudden and take over the system. Margaret Mead also said, never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. Okay? We can change it because we can be small groups of people acting in a chaotic world. In chaos, butterfly effects happen. Small things become big things, big changes. You know? So we can become part of the critical mass here and now, which is spreading because there is no local truth. There's no strictly here and now. Here and now is there and everywhere at all times. So start the process. That's the message. Yeah. By becoming the change, as Gandhi said.
Yeah. So lastly, anything other than the book that you are working on that you want people to know about? Obviously, you know, the book and when it's out, we're happy to promote that and let people know about it. But any other parting words or just information that you would want people to go to learn more about what's happening and what's coming?
I am overcommitted, frankly, and I'm trying to get many things going. But the most important among them are two things. One is the upshift movement, which means don't just read about it, join it, And it is now being put on a website on the internet, the upshift movement. We are now next week, this coming weekend in Rome, we have a meeting of the board of what we call the WUM, the World Upstream Movement. And this, we hope to create it and put it out on the internet. It will be registered as a formal movement in London officially, and we'll have members adherent organizations the world over. So that's one thing. Follow this, will appear on, as of next week, I think it'll appear more and more on the internet as World Upstream Movement. The other thing, the last thing that I want to mention this occasion is, I believe in informal discussions with insightful people, just like the two of you. I believe in this kind of discussions. I've carried out a number of such discussions over the past year or two. I have collected some that are recorded on video, and we're trying to put this forth as a series, as a talk show series on the internet, perhaps also on PBS. But this will be a series of upshift conversations with Ervin Laszlo and friends. So this is another project that will hit perhaps the internet and perhaps the television stations also in a matter of a few weeks or perhaps a few months. But I'm trying to get them over there. So I hope you open up and become part of it, because it's not just a question of sitting back and listening, acting, being part of it, and joining with other people. It's a good cause. It's the cause of evolution on this planet.
Yeah. Hear, hear, right? And we're happy to extend the reach of your messages, and anything that you're working on. We'll definitely let our community know, which is global. So we will be sharing that with everyone. And wow, we are just so honored, really, just so honored. One of these days, I don't know if you could tell, but Anthony is Italian, about as Italian as they get. So one of these days, hopefully we're going to make it over to Italy in 2023 at some point. So,
You have an invitation already 2022, but almost 23 now. But you are most welcome in Tuscany, in nature. You're living on a hilltop, surrounded by just birds and bees, and occasionally a wild boar that is roaming around. Other than that, we have just our dog and our nature around us. So welcome to visit us in this little abode on a hilltop in Tuscany, which is favored by nature. It's a beautiful nature, but nature is beautiful everywhere. Some of it pleasanter to live in, some a little less pleasant. This is very pleasant. And I try to use not just to sit back and relax, but to also to offer something so that people can come together and do things together. But you're welcome to come, both of you. Anytime you find yourself in Italy, to come and visit.
Maybe we will come over with our mutual friend Mark, because we do want to lead a spiritual retreat over there, and Tuscany is high on the list. So we'll see. Maybe the synchronicities of the universe will bring us all together, and we'll show up with a really nice bottle of Barolo.
We have our own wine here, so you're welcome to that too.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Well, what an honor it has been, and I know it is for all of our viewers and listeners as well. So just beautiful work, and we are happy to have this time with you.
Wonderful. Thank you.